Hello, fabulous listeners. Thanks for tuning in to Old Bodies Outside. This is your host, Dr. Brian Peterson. Today, we are extremely honored to have Dr. Jared Williams on the show. On June 5th of 2021, Dr. Williams was elected to represent District 6 of the city of Fort Worth, which is the community that raised him. He is the first African-American council member to represent District 6 and one of the youngest council members ever in the history of Fort Worth. Currently, he is serving his first term and represents over 108,000 residents in far south and southwest Fort Worth, where he works intimately alongside communities to ensure that opportunities reach more families across the district, city, and state. Dr. Williams brings a people-first approach to leadership, a proven equity lens when making decisions, and a deep passion for serving his community. He believes in leading by using collective values and hopes, and prioritizes residents' voices and being an approachable leader. Additionally, he earned a doctorate in environmental science and science education and studied sustainable urban infrastructure and development at the University of North Texas. And most importantly, he is a proud husband, father, and son. You can check out more about Dr. Williams on his website, which is drjaredwilliams.com. Dr. Williams, it's an immense pleasure to have you on Old Bodies Outside.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor.
Yeah, Dr. Williams, I'm so glad that you're on Old Bodies Outside. And one of the things that I think is so cool is that you know my research world, and now you're in the political world, and I don't know the political world at all. So I'm looking to learn a lot from you today.
Vice versa, I think.
Well, I just first want to start off this conversation with hearing, being a council member, I don't know much about it. I just got to imagine it is super, super busy. It's just that you're fully committed to a life of service. And so I don't know if there's a such thing as a normal day, but what's a normal day like for Dr. Jared Williams?
Oh, man, that's a great question. I don't know if I've ever been asked that. Every morning I wake up at about 4:45. I am a father of a newborn, Janelle, who is going to be 12 weeks this Saturday. And she wakes up at 4:30 a.m. So I thought I was going to be the early riser in the house, but she has quickly changed that. So I wake up at about 4:45. I always do what I call devotion and reflection time first thing in the morning. And then I go to the gym and I spend a few hours there, maybe 2 hours working out. And then from there, the day is like fast and furious. My running joke is, if you don't catch me before 8 a.m., it's probably hard to catch me. And so from about 8 a.m. probably till 9 p.m., I'm doing a number of things, from meetings, prepping for policy work, hosting neighborhood meetings and attending events in the district. All of it's centered on service, but it certainly is nonstop. And I think, I get a 30-minute lunch break and a 30-minute dinner with the family, and then I'm back at it. So that's the typical day.
Yeah, well, congrats on Janelle being healthy and coming into your life. I'm sure, every day you're just grateful for the awe that she brings.
Absolutely. I am proud to be a #girl dad.
Yeah. And I love that you start off your day with some devotions and reflections. I mean, that's something that's really important in my life, especially just starting off the day with gratitude. And starting off the day with gratitude is something that I think is just really important for my healthy functioning. So that's something that I felt a quick connection with you as you said that. So that's really cool.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's so important, especially in the realm of public service, to take those moments for gratitude and for deep reflection. My parents were, public servants in their own right. My mom was a second grade teacher. My dad was a high school teacher and a pastor, and both of them were huge advocates for me growing up. And they would always say it's just as important to pour in as it is to pour out. And in the work of, being a council member and also just being a fierce advocate for, building strong neighborhoods across my district, that's a lot of pouring out, right? And it's important to find moments for myself, for me to recenter, reground, and pour in to myself so that I can be good for others throughout the day, each day. So,
yeah, it makes sense to me. It makes sense to me. And I see it very similarly as, being able to lead a life of committed service, you got to make sure you're taking care of yourself. And I think that's just wonderful too that you grew up in the type of household you did. It sounds like your parents are just absolutely wonderful people. Your dad being a pastor, your mom working in education. That's awesome. So what great role models you've had.
Indeed.
And did I see it correctly? I think on your website that your dad, did he swear you in as a council member?
Yeah, that was the coolest thing ever.
Yeah. How did that happen?
So in the city of Fort Worth, we have swearing in ceremonies, and each council member and the mayor are asked by city staff who they would like to give them the oath of office. And so for me, knowing that the huge impact my parents had, my mom passed a few years due to breast cancer. And so I thought it was really important to be able to celebrate that moment, knowing that both my parents invested so much in it, oftentimes their last to ensure that not only did I grow up healthy, whole, and living a fulfilling life, but that I was paying that forward to my community. And so to see my dad in that moment, and it's on video out there somewhere, but he had mentioned, some to the effect of your mom would be so proud, wish she was here. And I just kind of, it was a heavy moment across the room, and there was a couple hundred folks there, and it was a really special moment. But I couldn't think of no one better to swear me in than my dad and my pastor.
Right.
I get a twofer there. So
yeah, well, if I was in your shoes, I think I'd be a teary, crying mess of just like happiness with the family around. And I mean, your mom was right there with you. She's seeing everything. Right, she's part of you, and that's what a cool ceremony that your mom wasn't there physically, but she was certainly there spiritually.
Right on. I completely agree.
Yeah. Okay, so getting into our conversation, the first thing I wanted to kind of start off with was I wanted to learn a little bit more about what is District 6 like. I've never been to the city of Fort Worth. I've not spent a lot of time in Texas, and so I do not know what District 6 is like. And so I just wanted to get a brief description of that.
Yeah, so the city of Fort Worth is my hometown. I am Fort Worth through and through. So much so that when I went to school at Fort Valley State University in Georgia, it's a HBCU in Middle Georgia, my nickname there was Tex. And so it was short for Texas, but because I was always talking about how great Fort Worth was. And so Fort Worth is, not only my hometown, but it's also the 12th largest city in the country and one of the fastest growing cities in the country. And when you think of District 6, I have the privilege of representing not only neighborhoods that I grew in, but a portion of the city that is to the far north, closer to the central city. It borders I-20, and as you go further and further southwest, you start to enter the fringes of the city, which is nestled by beautiful tall grass prairies of the Blackland Prairie or the Fort Worth Prairie, and lots of open space and undeveloped land. And in a city that's growing, so fast, I think it's important, in District 6 to kind of recognize that we are on those fringes. And so just as much as you get the urban life, you also get kind of that rural farm ranch life as well. That, when folks think of Texas, I would imagine they envision something that kind of looks like District 6. And so it's a beautiful part of town. Not absent of its challenges, but I'm so thankful to be able to represent the district, and also grateful to be able to work alongside so many amazing residents who believe that we can solve anything if we do it together.
Yeah, I love that. I love it. Well, it sounds like a great place. You made me kind of think of my area. We have some tall grass prairie here, but different. And I'm not, I think you know a little bit more about tall grass than I do, but it's not. What is it? Fort Worth tall grass down there? Is that what it's called?
So it's the Fort Worth Prairie. It has the big four grasses. We have similar grasses. We're all a part of the Great Plains.
Yeah.
So we have the switchgrass, big blue stem, little blue stem, Indian grass. We have our blue bonnets, right? And other annual and perennial wildflowers. And we're known for our mesquite trees and, our prickly pear cacti and a number of other species that you would see in a tall grass prairie.
Yeah, nice. Well,
Yeah.
with Fort Worth growing so fast, I got to imagine that is there probably a lot of strategic planning to, instead of being reactive, being proactive to, there's going to be good challenges associated with growth. But I feel like there's a lot of proactive things that need to be done. And so what types of things are you all kind of looking to the future for in District 6 right now?
Yeah, so our goal as a council office has been, laser set on this idea of what does it take to build a prosperous city. And for me, it's based on the building blocks of a city, which are our neighborhoods. And so our number one goal is this idea of building strong neighborhoods all across the district. And when we think about that, we think about that through a number of lenses. Ensuring that we have strong economies around our neighborhood, and that as we're developing new economic opportunities, that we're considering things like the quality of jobs. How do we preserve the natural history, right, the landscape, and be intentional about the development, being thoughtful in every sense of the word when it comes to sustainability. Also, ensuring that we have safe neighborhoods. And I think safety is, yes, it's when we pick up 911 in a crisis, that our first response is there serving to the highest standard. And also it's crosswalks, and it's school zones, and it's sidewalks and street lights, et cetera. So making sure that we're making strategic investments in city services that help improve the quality of our neighborhoods. And then one of our most important priorities is prioritizing the voice of our neighbors on decisions large and small, from the type of investments they'd like to see, in their parks, to the types of economic opportunities that they would like to see. And we do all of that through regular town halls and meetings and one-on-one calls with our constituents.
Wow, that was a lot. So I'm starting to understand why it goes from 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. every day.
Yeah.
Well,
we have big goals.
That's good. That's good. Well, that sounds fantastic. And you hit on so many points there, but I did want to focus in on one of it. You mentioned about parks. And one of the things that I really love about parks, protected areas, and open spaces is I kind of look at it like it adds to the health of the community, and it adds, a sliver to that prosperity too, because health is part of that prosperity. And so I did see on your website that you have an open space program. And so I wanted to hear a little bit more about that and what your campaign's been doing for that.
Yeah, absolutely. So our open space program, started a few years back, but we really were able to, inject some significant resources lately. Last year, we had a citywide bond election. And one of the propositions on the bond was to provide $15 million in bond funding to fund the open space conservation program.
Wow.
And the importance of that, one is, it was unprecedented in the city of Fort Worth, being that it's a new program, but also to dedicate funds in a way to preserve our natural history, the natural history of the Fort Worth Prairie, and ensure that we had resources available to ensure that every resident, no matter whether they live on the southwest side, the east side, north side, west side, or in the central city, that we have resources dedicated to preserve that legacy of the Fort Worth Prairie through open space, and that those spaces are accessible to residents to enjoy, from whether they like to hike, whether they like birding, right, whether they like IDing new plants or rare species, or whether it's their first time in a tall grass prairie, that we would have those spaces for them. And so I'm really proud, not only to have stood up for that proposition when the council was deliberating which propositions would move forward to the voters. And I'm equally proud of the residents for seeing the importance of open space conservation, and by giving a vote of confidence in support of that bond measure, which passed. And so now we have an open space program that has a significant amount of resources to acquire open space areas. And that was done through a master plan process. Our open space conservation team, who were staffed by the city of Fort Worth, worked with leading experts in the field to prioritize spaces all across the city based on a number of ecosystem services variables, right? Like from the amount of productivity that a space can provide to the benefits that it has in regulating environmental impacts to the cultural benefits that it provides to society interacting with those spaces. And so, yeah, I'm really proud of this. They have a tool, prioritization tool, that allows us to prioritize parcels that come up for sale, and ultimately to potentially acquire those into the open space conservation portfolio across the city. So it's definitely a unique program, and I'm proud and think it's a model for how we build smart cities that are sustainable, that maintain and prioritize ecosystem services that the land provides in an urban environment.
Yeah, and gosh, Jared, that was wonderful. I love that you have this background of being an environmental scientist and then also coming into politics. Like you're bringing in so much knowledge and background, and it's to me, and maybe I'm a little bit biased, but it's refreshing to see someone with a science background in a role that you are in. So like hearing you just being all proud of what your campaign has done, what the city has done, I'm like, gosh, I'm proud of you, Jared. Like, this is so cool.
Oh man, you know what? I had no idea that my path, in environmental science and science education would lead me into public service. Me and my wife have conversations about, just looking back, how the heck did we end up here? And she has said it more times than once that me having a PhD from such a prestigious institution in UNT is probably one of the best degrees that someone could have in public service. And at first I was like, wait a minute, what do you mean by that? And she explained it a little bit more, but she said the benefit of it is, and this all too well, professional degrees, especially doctoral degrees, especially research based degrees, we're trained to think about novel problems and how to address those through the literature, right, to create novel solutions to the problems that we see and that we face. And so that seems to be my day to day, is tackling issues that I've never heard of. One of them is egrets. I never knew what an egret was, but it's a federally protected migratory bird.
Okay.
And we had lots of federally protected migratory birds nesting in this one lady's house on her in her front lawn in one tree. I would say it was over 300 birds, and
Wow.
we did a lot of research over a very short period of time, and engaged with residents with what the challenges they were seeing, and brought in a number of federal and local stakeholders, governmental players, to help ultimately create a operational policy to mitigate the impact of federally protected migratory birds, while also ensuring that they have safe passage through open spaces, like through our open space conservation program. So that's just one example of day-to-day issues that residents bring to us, and we have to study them, study best practices, work with staff, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to to be a scientist, but also to be able to take my life experiences and apply them into the world of public policy. It's definitely a cool fit.
Yeah, I like that your wife pointed that out, and I
Yeah.
do agree with it. I guess you'll be a little self-biased, but yeah, like going through my degree, your degree, everyone's doctoral degrees. You got to first really concisely identify the problem, know what you're working with, and then
Yeah.
you look at what's out there, the literature and whatnot. But you learn how to solve problems, and then that's a transferable skill set to whatever you're doing, whether it's a life of service, or if you're putting on a podcast for some reason.
Yeah, right.
But like
And then
in
the
a
other thing is we're trained to be unbiased as well, right? Like, so we're looking at a problem without interjecting our own personal
right.
ideas to formulate a hypothesis, right? We're taking the data in terms of what we see as a challenge or a question, right? And investigating that through an unbiased lens, ultimately to get to a solution um, that is uh, that is testable, right, through statistical hypotheses. So it's
Yeah,
really neat to be able to take that same lens and apply it to
absolutely.
public policy. Yeah,
I like that last note there, because I think that's something that's really important as a politician is not having your confirmation bias just go crazy, like
yeah.
and I think, that's really important as a politician. So that's a fantastic note that you just had.
hmm
Wow. Yeah. Well, anyways, continuing on with the open space program, I know that one of the largest parks in your district is Rock Creek Park, and I think you've done some additions there recently. So first off, how big is
hmm
Rock Creek Park, and what types of stuff have you and your campaign done for Rock Creek Park?
Yeah, it started as 270 or so acres of conservation open space, and a year into my term after approving that, a little over a year, we were able to add another 30 acres to that. That work, as monumental as it was, it's part of a even larger work through the Great Plains Restoration Council, where they worked in that same watershed and habitat to preserve hundreds, if not thousands, of additional acres in partnership with developers, with our office, to in the form of conservation easements, in the form of park dedications, in a number of ways that ensure that um, we're not creating islands of open space, but that we're certainly connecting our open space areas to have the maximal impact, and also the maximal benefit to the city and to our residents. And what's beautiful about that is it's adjacent, that mosaic of conservation easements, and including Rock Creek Park, is only a stone's throw away from the Army Corps of Engineers conservation area, which includes Benbrook Lake. So it's definitely an important watershed. It's an important remnant of the Fort Worth Prairie, and it's a part of a larger project, really, to conserve the natural history of the Fort Worth Prairie.
Yeah, one of the things that's really important about these parks and protected areas and these open space programs is the history that's part of those areas. And I think that sometimes there's not a diversity of history that gets told there because there's so much different cultural history in these places. And
Mm-hmm.
so I want to know if that's something that you all are really trying to incorporate is, telling it all the different histories of people there, not just, saying, hey, this is what white settlers saw when they came here and that's it. Because that does happen, unfortunately, but it's telling a diversity of stories to signal like, hey, like everyone is welcome here. We want people to use this. We want people to benefit from it. And so I want to know, kind of on the interpretation side of stuff, the heritage history side. Is that something that y'all are doing?
That is something that I am keenly aware of. We're really early on, since we just acquired the land, and kind of what the planning of the park will look like in its full fruition. But that's certainly something that has been a priority for me, that I've communicated to the Parks and Recreation Department staff. Is that as we're partnering with our residents and our community stakeholders, that not only do we create an amenity that showcases and highlights and honors the physical aspects of the park, from the tall grasses to Rock Creek itself, which is full of fossils and a number of other really cool things, but also that we work to tell the story of the interactions that our ancestors have had with that land. And some, there's a lot of stories in Rock Creek Park, not only about indigenous peoples, but also about, land stewards who were very keenly aware of the importance of sustainable ranching and sustainable land management, and ensuring that we are intentional about preserving the prairie, because it provides, resources that take a really long time to replicate and are very expensive to re-engineer. And so There's so many stories, and I think what's equally as important is ensuring that we have a space where residents can tell new stories of
Mm.
their interactions with those lands. And so ensuring that we have programs that allow folks to discover their connection to nature, and from littles to our seasoned saints is how my dad called them, but our older adults, that we leave space for within the tapestry of the park for their stories to be left with the park. And so we're very keenly focused on that aspect of, what does it mean to have connections to parks and open space. And so my hope is we'll continue to champion that priority as we get further along the process of developing the park as an amenity for the public.
Yeah, well, it sounds like you're doing a great job to help people have multifaceted connections with these places, not just, getting outside and being in nature, but all these extra things too that come and help people get out there, benefit from these places, and feel like it's part of their home, part of their community too. And those
Mm-hmm.
multifaceted connections is really important. So that's really great to hear. So on the political side of stuff, how long do these
Yeah.
processes take? You're like, okay, like, hey, like we have some money to, buy another 30 acres of land. What goes into that process? I mean, I have no clue.
I mean, it's if you've ever purchased a piece of property, it has a lot of similar aspects.
Okay.
But it's the buyer is the local municipality, so there's probably a few extra steps that are involved with that. The city, and specifically our open space team within the city, does a really amazing job at vetting properties through our prioritization tool, and then going through the land acquisition process, which is filled with negotiations and due diligence, and making sure that the parcel of land that we're acquiring is not only a sound investment for us to make, but that we're ensuring that we're not assuming any liability through the due diligence process. And so that takes some time. Um, it's well worth the time, but it's certainly a extensive process similar to buying properties.
Okay. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Nice. Nice. And so when you went to University of North Texas to get your doctorate, what led you into environmental science? Like, where did that come from in your life?
Yeah. So I unknowingly, but in reflection, I remember me and my brother growing up. We didn't have much as a family. My parents were grad students themselves, both of them pursuing their master's degrees. Um, I would have to pay for field trips some kind of way whenever we'd have paid field trips. And I remember collecting cans and taking them to the recycling center. My parents would drive me every day after collecting cans, from litter, or collecting my friends' cans in the lunchroom and recycling those for money as a way to earn my way onto a field trip. And so fast forward, you know, I played football in high school, and when I went to college to play football at Fort Valley State University, um, I remember our academic advisors taking us on a tour of facilities within the school so that we could select which major we wanted to select. And so I remember walking into a lab that was filled with plants. And I remember the professor who was managing that lab turning off the fluorescent lights and turning on ultraviolet lights over the plants, and seeing all the plants fluoresce green. And little
Wow.
did I know, first of all, it was really cool. Second of all, I had no idea what made those plants fluoresce. But something had sparked in me, and as soon as that spark turned on, I was constantly curious about the world of nature, and so I earned my biotechnology degree with emphasis in plant science from the College of Agriculture at Fort Valley State. And then I was dead set on going to Vanderbilt or some school outside of Texas. And my mom had been diagnosed with breast cancer. So I came back home, and I remember at the same time calling TCU, a professor there by the name of Dr. Mike Slattery, and telling them the situation and telling them that I wanted to continue my studies in sustainability and environmental science. And one thing led to another, and I ended up getting a full ride and got paid as a TA to go to TCU. And it was at that moment when I got to TCU that I remember talking to one of my mentors who's no longer with us, but Dr. Tony Burgess, who was one of the leading experts on the Fort Worth Prairie and one of the leading scientists on the Biosphere 2. And I was in this existential crisis of what I want to do in my life. And I grew up in a family of educators. I loved science. And I also recognized that the world was full of great educators and full of great scientists. But that conversation led me to this idea that my niche probably was somewhere in between those of understanding through the lens of science, empirically issues that are facing our communities, that impact our communities, that our communities either know about or have no idea about due to lack of access to the literature, right? And being able to walk alongside communities and educate them and also learn from them about important issues through the lens of the environment that impact their everyday life, and then to work together to create solutions that ultimately we can share back through the literature. And so that all of that journey led me to UNT. I got my dissertation and wrote my dissertation on the American lawn addictions, which basically talks about, our love of non-native turf grasses and the impacts that has on native ecosystems and on the ecosystem services that they provide, especially in urban environments that are rapidly growing and rapidly becoming developed. And, really connecting the idea of the need for ecosystem services that are provided through native landscaping and xeriscaping, and connecting that to a public perception of what landscape aesthetics looks like and how to directly educate folks on the benefits and the beauty of xeriscapes in this mosaic of a rapidly growing urban environment. And so that all led me to continue public service, right? You got to apply it. And the best way to apply it is in government. So
Nice, yeah.
Here I am.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you're at where you're at. That was quite a story, and I couldn't agree more that those educational strategies are just so important. And I see it within my field of science, which is within that conservation umbrella, but a different vein. And that's something that we're always talking about is how can we educate the public about conservation ethics, stewardship, how to conserve this place and that. And gosh, Jared, it sounded like I was, as you're giving your explanation, I was thinking about how I got into my field of science, and my journey was a little bit different than yours. But so like you, I was actually a collegiate athlete. I ran cross country and track at University of San Diego, and at the time I was just like shooting for the stars. I was like, oh, I'm going to be a doctor, like an MD doctor, medical doctor. Went through and did all the requirements, and then I got done with undergrad. And it was time to start studying for the MCATs. And I was just like, I didn't have any passion for it anymore. And I was like, and I remember talking to my mom, going on a walk with my mom. And I was feeling a little like embarrassed that I had lost the passion. Being a mom, she's like, whatever, if you lost the passion, like, you don't have to do that. Like, find your passion, go with your passion. And so I was like, well, I don't really know what it is for the time being. But, I'm out of college, so I need to work. So I actually became a high school biology and chemistry teacher for about 7-8 years. And at that time, in my late 20s, I took my first ever backpacking trip. It took me to my late 20s. And I took that first backpacking trip, and I was like, oh, man, this is it right here. That's my passion. And so coming back I got really into backpacking for a couple of years and just like wanted to travel and backpack. And it was pretty affordable lifestyle, actually. But that is what led me into then wanting to apply to schools. and go back and go into graduate school, do a master's, do a PhD. I was part of departments that are called Parks, Recreation, and Tourism.
Mm-hmm.
Before we started recording, I was kind of telling you how we use a lot of social psychology approaches to conservation
Mm-hmm.
to boost conservation ethic and stewards and whatnot. But we also do, like, my degree is a lot of just tracking where people go and whatnot, visitor travel patterns, understanding how people travel around different parks and protected areas. And I also do that for air tours above national parks. I work with the National Park Service and map out where air tours are above the parks and how their noise impacts terrestrial visitors on the ground and whatnot.
Yeah.
But anyways, I don't mean to get into my research so much,
that's really cool.
I just was like comparing your notes and mine, and like, yeah, like it took me a little while to get into it, but gosh, like I really love it a lot. And I think that, as I mentioned kind of at the start of that question, was it's really cool that you are able to bring the education, also just the mental frameworks and structures that your wife pointed out, into being a politician and whatnot. And so I know that we are coming up on some big dates for District 6. I think
Yeah.
April 24th to May 2nd is something going on, and May 6th is something going on. So what's going on during that time?
Absolutely. So the first set of dates are early voting here in the city of Fort Worth. I am up for re-election, and our campaign is working really hard to connect with voters about what they would like to see over the next 2 years in and around our district and across our city. And so we are working really diligently to earn the votes of our residents. And April 24th is the first day that our residents in District 6 could vote for the city council and mayoral elections. And the last day to early vote is May 2nd. And then if for some reason someone out there wasn't able to vote early, the last day to vote in this election is May 6th on election day.
Okay, nice. And for our listeners out there who may not live in District 6 or the Fort Worth area, if they wanted to donate $5 or $10, is there a way that can be done?
Absolutely. We like to promote $6 contributions to represent District 6, but if you do more than 5 or 6, that's totally fine as well. But you can do that at our website at drjaredwilliams.com. You can also visit that same website to learn more about our campaign, to subscribe for updates, and also to keep track of our progress and the press that captures our progress. So our website has lots of great resources to continue to engage with our campaign.
Okay, I like that. I like $6 for District 6 for Jared Williams. Yeah. And so when the election is on May 6th too. So
yeah, it worked out pretty nicely, right?
Yeah. So when do you how quickly, I mean, is it within like hours that you find out the results of the election?
Yeah, so as soon as the polls close, it usually takes a couple hours, but every 30 minutes, the county elections office will update the county elections website on votes coming in. And usually, depending on how close the race is, you may know as early as 8 or 9 p.m. on election day, or as late as, like in my case, for our first term, I don't think we found out until midnight.
Oh, wow.
And the whole night we were down until the last precinct came in, and we won by a little under 300 votes.
Whoa.
And our campaign worked really hard. We were in a runoff, so we had 2 elections within 30 days. And for the general election, we doubled average turnout from 5,000 to 10,000, a little over 10,000 residents participating in this election. And then in the runoff, we tripled average turnout to 15,000. And so I really believe that it's important in our representative democracy for people to voice their values and what they hope to see in their community and their neighborhood through their vote. Indeed, the vote is one way of expressing our civic voice in this democracy. And I think it's tragic when turnout is 5%, right? And so one of our missions, win, lose, or draw, is to ensure that we're investing intentionally to educate and encourage folks, no matter who they vote for, to exercise their democratic right in this country to elect their representative to represent their vision, their values, and to help tackle the issues that they face alongside of them. And so our work continues, and we're hoping to see big numbers in this election as well in terms of turnout.
Yeah, well, Jared, that was such a nice thing that you said there, and you underscored that, it's not all about winning. It's, let's get more people to turn out. Let's get more people to vote. Like, this is a democracy. We have a democratic right. And, vote for the person that has your values and is getting after the stuff that you want them to see you get after. And I think that's a great, big, broad vision there for that just is going to better Fort Worth no matter what. With more voter turnout, it's going to better Fort Worth. And so that's really fantastic to hear. And so your term, you're finishing up your first term, and it's a 2-year term?
That's correct.
It's a 2-year term. Okay, and I got to imagine this is with the election coming up. It's just another level of busyness, probably.
Yeah. To have a newborn, to work a true 9 to 5, and also to work a non-traditional 40-hour-a-week job in representing District 6. And on top of all of that, running a campaign while also, being a son, a husband, a father, a deacon at church, and a friend, a number of other things. And so, but it's not only hard work, it's hard work. And so I really enjoy doing it.
Yeah, I've seen you definitely bring the heart to it. And, one of the things that I love seeing on your website was, I think, or maybe it was your Instagram. It was your Instagram. I saw some of the Oktoberfest pictures.
That's actually how me and my wife met. So Oktoberfest is a really big deal in our household.
Nice. That's great. That's fantastic. I was thinking, gosh, and I'm going off of memory right now. Is your birthday near that time, or your wife's birthday near that time? Okay, yeah.
My birthday, October 18th.
Nice. And so at Oktoberfest, we're going to have a little bit of digression here. Do you have a favorite style of beer?
So I really like, and the real beer drinkers will probably judge me, but I really, really like Radlers. And my preferred beer of choice is a Spaten. It's their Oktoberfest. It's from Munich, and a Radler is basically 2/3 of your beer of choice, and then 1/3 of some type of spritz like Sprite or any other 7-Up, any other clear soda mixed with the beer. When you're drinking tall boys, right, at Oktoberfest, it's a way of kind of running the marathon without pushing the limit.
There you go. I like that. It reminded me when I was in undergrad, I studied abroad in London at a school called University of London Queen Mary, and I was introduced to a drink out there called the Snake Bite. And the Snake Bite it was like half beer, half cider. So you got a little bit of carbonation of the cider, and then they put a little bit of black currant in there, and it'd give it kind of a purpley pink look to it. And it was really, really good, actually. Have you heard of that before?
Yeah, you got to pay. Yeah, I've never had one, but you have to pace yourself with those.
Yeah. Approach it like a marathon, right? Like it's not a 1 mile event.
Exactly.
Oh gosh. Well, Jared, I really appreciate you coming on to Old Bodies Outside. We'll wrap up an episode here and let you get back to all the great work you're doing. I wanted to just repeat some of the information that we said in terms of your website. That's Dr. Jared Williams. So I'm going to spell out Jared, Jared Williams.com. So drjaredwilliams.com. Listeners out there, please go to Dr. Jared Williams' website. Donate that $6. You got the early election going on April 24th to May 2nd, and the election is on May 6th. And
that's great.
Dr. Williams, I hope the best for you. I really love the work you're doing. I'm proud of you. You're doing great stuff. And I feel so honored that you took the time out of your busy schedule to come on to Old Bodies Outside. So I'm filled with gratitude. I woke up with gratitude today knowing that you're going to be on the show. So thank you so much.
Thank you. This has been fun. I appreciate it, my friend.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to throw on the outro music and we'll call it an episode.
Cool.